My name is Margaret Rodriguez. I was born Margaret Leamy in New Zealand. I met my husband in Spain, I think it was in 1961, and we got married some years later in Seattle, Washington. And after living around different places in the United States, he worked for Boeing and Lockheed, designing planes. We ended up here in Roswell with our 4 young children, and that was in 1974. And it has been a wonderful home for us. My children have grown up here, all been very successful, and I now have 17 grandchildren, one in heaven, the oldest one in heaven, and 4 great-grandchildren. So I feel Roswell has blessed us. My grandson's name was Christopher Allen Sanders. He was an amazing child from the get-go. He was just one of those little boys that everybody loved. He had beautiful blue eyes that just stood out, and even when he went to the institute, they called him Blue Eyes. But he's a very, I'd say, spiritual little boy in many ways. He was the one that always wanted to go to church with me. And on a Friday night, you might know that the Catholics do the Stations of the Cross every Friday night in the church. Well, Friday night's a busy night for most young people. They don't want to go to church. But Christopher always went with me. And when he was little, he would look around and he'd see what the soldiers were doing to Jesus. And he was crying one night. And I said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Nana, why are the soldiers doing that to Jesus?" I said, "Well, they didn't like what he was saying because he was telling them to change their way of life, and they didn't want that." He said, "Nana, when I grow up, I'll be a good soldier." He did that to me when he was about 4. But my husband and he were absolutely so close. As a little boy, he was very close to me, but as a teenager, he became my husband's best friend, and that was really true. My husband was very patient, and he was interested in the military. He had served also as a soldier, and that's why Christopher chose the army, because Papa had been in the army. Well, while he was at the institute, 9/11 happened, and he was so stressed about it all, he actually got his dad's truck set up on Main Street with a big American flag flying. So he truly was meant to be a soldier, and our consolation is that he died doing what he believed was so right. He had an amazing year. He got married, he joined the military, went to Iraq. He had done his training and went to Iraq, and he was there for his first term. And one of the things that happened during that time was when the base was blowing up. They had a tunnel to go in, to get into the big room where they all went for their meals, and it was blowing up while he was walking in. So that was so close to Christopher meeting death that time. So he thought he was invincible. So did his wife. She never dreamt anything would happen to him. And he ended up carrying his buddies out on the tables. All those who were killed, they carried them out on the cafeteria tables. So that was one of the very traumatic things of his first tour. And they let him come home after that. They gave the soldiers involved with that whole thing unexpected break. He was home for a short time. It was an amazing time. So we were so blessed. He was home after his first tour, his wife and 2 little children. He had had 2 little children by this time. He was home for his sister's wedding. And this is a beautiful thing. his dad had bought a boat, especially before Christopher came home. And he and his father and brother had about 3 days camping there, just the three of them, which was really nice. And then he went back to Iraq, and this time he went back not excited. He knew what he was getting into. He was in Baghdad 5 months before he got killed. And I remember my husband and I Skyped him, and we were talking with him, and that's the first time that he was gone over there that I heard a different tone in his voice. Because he always made light of it. Everything's fine, we're safe, don't worry about us. But this time they were just setting up their tent in Sinsul, because they'd driven Al-Qaeda out of Baghdad. And Al-Qaeda had gone to the Sinsul Valley. So I was really upset when I knew that Christopher and all his unit were out in the Sinsul Valley. And then 3 weeks later, on January the 9th, the fatal day, I had been at noon mass at Assumption Church, and I was leaving, and I got in my car, and as I drove away, I heard there'd been a big explosion. 6 Americans and 1 Iraqi interpreter had been killed in Baghdad. And I remember thinking, oh, thank God, Christopher's left Baghdad. I remember a great sense of relief, but I prayed I knew how the other parents would be feeling, those who lost. That night, I was at Holy Hour at the Adoration Chapel up at Assumption with my friend Vicky Purcell, and we would go from 11 o'clock till midnight every week for 1 hour praying. And my husband called about 11:45, and he said, stay longer and pray harder. They're looking for Dara, his wife. And then I went home. I guess I got home about 12:30, and my husband was just sitting there. He said, we're waiting to hear. They're still trying to find Dara, his wife. And he said, our son-in-law Nick had phoned from Germany. He was a doctor there. And he said, I've called every hospital, and Christopher's not in any of the hospitals, because they flew them all out, those who survived. And so we weren't very hopeful, as you can imagine. And then about 1 o'clock, my husband answered the phone, and I heard him say, oh no, baby. And he was talking to Maria, our daughter, his mother. And I ran over to Rod, and he said, he didn't make it. And I remember my reaction. I'm not proud of it now. But I just ran around the house, banging on the walls, just hitting anything I could. And I wasn't angry at God per se, but I was angry. And I was saying, God, why did you let it happen? Why did you let it happen? We prayed so hard. We were stunned at how the word got around so fast. And my dear husband, he wasn't, how can I put it? He wasn't a social butterfly, but he rose to the occasion. He was making coffee for everybody. So I think you stay busy, and people coming help. They really do. It shows support, but it also occupies you. Makes you think of other things. I remember Pastor Troy there one evening. And I remember it so well. I don't know if he would remember this, but we were in our kitchen and Pastor Troy came up to me to talk with me. And he said, Margaret, I want you to understand that your grandson, he died differently than most of us will die. I said, here he was running into this building where they had been told they had little children strapped with bombs to run out. He ran in there to do something great. In a blast, he was immediately before the face of God. When he said that to me, he said, immediately your grandson was before the face of God. I think that was probably the best thing that was said to me in that whole time. People really don't know what to say. They hug you, they love you, and wonderful. But those words, I'll always remember them. And I appreciate Pastor Troy, how he said that to me. I think he took my hand and just looked at me and said, he was before the face of God. I wonder what I would say to him. Probably a New Zealand expression, good on you, son. Good on you.